All right, so we now begin the next book in the Bible, which is the book of Daniel. And chronologically, the book of Daniel takes place during the exile as well as after the exile. So the Babylonian exile is going to last 70 years. And Daniel's taken into Babylon as a youth, right? So there's some stories about his youthhood, I guess you could say, in Babylon. And then there's also some stories relating to when he stays behind. Even though the exile's over, he remains behind, and some other Jews remain behind in Babylon as well. So, without further ado, chapter 1, verse 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. When is this taking place? Well, this is taking place in 2 Kings chapter 24, verse 1. And approximately the year this happens is 605 BC. Although nailing down an exact date with these things is always difficult because they don't use our calendar. Verse 2, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into the hand of some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, handsome and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to serve in the king's palace, and to teach them the letters and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the rich food which the king ate and of the wine which he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Among these were 4 main characters: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, all from the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belshazzar, so keep track of that name. Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's rich food, or with the wine which he drank. Now, there's some misunderstanding here. Some people will just think like, oh, the king was eating pork, and the king was drinking wine, which was bad, which I guess it's possible they're eating pork at the king's table. But you guys, the Old Testament and Mosaic Covenant inside and out. Why would Daniel resolve to not eat from the king's table? Yeah.
He was probably sacrificed.
All right. It's an issue of monotheism. It's always monotheism, right? Same answer every time. And that is exactly what happened. So everything that had been offered at the king's table would have been sacrificed to a god, because you don't kill an animal without sacrificing to a god. That's a waste of an animal. And you might make the god angry at you. Feel this idea that when animals were sacrificed, like they just burned the entire sheep and gave it up and said goodbye. It's not what they did. They ate the animal as well. Okay, but they might set aside a portion or libation to the god. All right, that would have been consumed by the priest, and that was the priest's pay for his office. So the king's rich food. The problem is that it's been offered to idols. Exactly. So therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him to not defile himself. Verse 9. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear lest my lord the king, who appointed your food and your drink, should see that you are in poorer condition than the youths who are of your own age. So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearances and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's rich food be observed by you. And according to what you see, deal with your servants. So he listened to them in this manner and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's rich food. So the steward took away the rich food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. As these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all letters and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and among them all none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding concerning which the king inquired them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. And Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. All right, so he enters the service under Nebuchadnezzar, and he stays in his government job all the way until Cyrus is king, which is several kings later. Chapter 2. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded the magicians and the enchanters, the sorcerers and the Chaldeans, be summoned to tell the king his dream. So Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and he calls all his advisors and magicians, says, look, this dream is really disturbing me. I want you to explain it to me. Here's the caveat. I'm not going to tell you what the dream is. That way I'll weed out any kind of BS explanation that you just make up on the spot. And if you can't tell me what the dream is, then I know you guys are all a bunch of fakers, and I'm just going to kill all of you. Well, sure enough, the magicians are like, we don't know what you dreamed. And so word goes out that the king is going to kill all the wise men, all the magicians in the city. Word eventually reaches Daniel. And when Daniel hears this, he then decides to go speak to the king. That brings us up to verse 17 of chapter 2. Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and told them to seek mercy of the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. And so after this prayer, jump down to verse 24. Daniel then approaches the king to interpret the dream. And verse 31 begins his explanation and interpretation of the dream. You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of the image was of fine gold, its breasts and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. All right, so a stone cut by no human hand comes and destroys this statue. So I'm going to give you the explanation of the dream right away, so you have it in quick notes in your Bible. The head of gold is the Babylonian Empire. The silver arms is the Medo-Persian Empire. So currently right now in history, the Babylonians have a vast empire. They're like the major rulers of the world. They're going to be conquered by the Persians. And the Persians have a joint empire with the Medes. So it's called the Medo-Persian Empire. And how it symbolizes in the statue is that as the statue moves down, it splits off into two arms, right? And so there's like two entities governing this part of the world power. And then once you go down into the belly and the thighs of bronze, that is the Greek Empire. So the Medo-Persian Empire historically is eventually conquered by Alexander the Great. When Alexander the Great is in charge, again, he splits his empire up into four parts. All right, and he gives it to his four generals to rule. And then the legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay, is a reference to the Roman Empire. The next major world empire to arise and conquer the Greeks are the Romans. And when you get to the end of Rome, it gets to become clay mixed with iron. Okay, it's very brittle, it's very fragile. Towards the end of the life of the Roman Empire, it was incredibly weak. Right? It just kind of fell apart and crumbled. Now what happens is a stone that's not cut by any human hands, which is an allusion to the virgin birth of Christ, gets thrown down and smashes the feet of the statue, and everything crumbles down. All right, so the coming of Christ destroys all these worldly powers and principalities. Verse 35. Then the iron and the clay, the bronze and the silver and the gold, all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. And the dream of the stone continues to grow and grow and grow, right? Which represents the expansion of the church, okay, across the world. And that is the new, eternal empire. It's Christendom. It's Christ's kingdom established on earth. Verse 36. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the might and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the sons of men, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the air, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. And after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron which crushes, it shall break and crush all these. All right, so of the metals listed, iron is the strongest, but it's also less decadent. This is kind of pointing out how Rome, it's going to be a great, mighty, powerful empire, have more control than any of the predecessors. However, it's not going to be as elegant as, say, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. All right, it's going to be lesser in wealth and magnificence compared to these old kingdoms. All right, we can stop here, and we'll continue the interpretation of the dream tomorrow.